Hello, and welcome to Dear First Gen Hija. I'm your host, Denise, and I'm honestly so happy you're here. Hi everyone, and welcome to our first episode, I guess. This episode will be an introduction episode, but I'm super excited to have you here listening, spending this time with me and in this space. What I want you to think of this podcast as is like hanging out with una amiga who just gets it. We're going to laugh, maybe tear up a little, and talk about the real stuff that comes up with being a first-gen daughter of immigrants. If you've ever felt like you're living entre dos mundos, one foot in your family's cultura, the other in American life, or even trying to understand what that even means, this is your space. If you've ever felt the pressure to succeed, the guilt when you say no, or the pride when you think about how far your family has come, amiga, you're in the right place. Okay. So let me start with my why. I'm a therapist, and I'm also the oldest daughter in my Mexican home. I actually was born in the US, and when I was 3 years old, my mom decided to take me and my brother to live in Mexico with my paternal grandparents while my father stayed behind and worked. And so I have a lot of love for my Mexican culture, and I it's an everyday battle trying to balance that with wanting to be successful here in the US. So if you're the oldest daughter too, you know what that means. Responsibility on responsibility. I've been the translator, the fixer, the second mom sometimes, and always the one trying to make sure everyone and everything's okay, even when I don't feel okay. I know what it's like to be la primera en todo, the first to graduate, and what that, heavy responsibility feels like, the first to step into spaces my family never imagined, or even spaces I never even knew of. And I know what it's like to carry that responsibility, to feel like you have to prove to the world and to myself that my parents' sacrifices were worth it, right? And as I have worked with first generation Latinx clients, one of the things that also comes up in my sessions a lot is the same themes: the pressure, the guilt, the pride, the confusion of trying to figure things out without a roadmap. And so from my own experiences and from my clients' experiences, I kept thinking to myself, I wish there were more resources, more conversations, more interventions made just for us. Because let's be real, there's, some support out there for first-gen students in general, or, for Latinas in general, but almost nothing that speaks directly to our experience, las hijas primerizas, and what that means. So I thought, okay, pues let's create it, right? A space where we can hear our stories, where our voices matter, and where we can feel seen. And that's why I decided to start this podcast called Dear First Gen Hija. So let's get into it. Who is the first gen daughter? Well, she's the one who gets handed the mail and asked, Mija, ¿qué dice aquí? And get yelled at when we have no idea what the mail says. She's the one translating at doctor's appointments or parent-teacher conferences, when really she should have just been worried about homework and thinking about friendships and relationships. She's the one who's become the mediator, the translator, la que resuelve todo, before she even knew what those words meant. But she's also the one who makes her family proud, who brings home good grades and sees the sparkle in her parents' eyes, even if they don't say much. She's the one who celebrates traditions, tamales en Navidad, quinceañeras, domingos en la iglesia. She's the one who laughs in Spanglish, who switches between worlds with ease, who carries las historias of her family in her heart. And amiga, that's me, that's you, that's us. So, I want you to take a minute and reflect with me. What roles have you carried as la hija primera? When did you first realize you were living entre dos culturas? What's one moment that made you feel proud? And maybe one that felt heavy? Take a deep breath. Whatever came up, you're not alone in it. Being first gen is pride and pressure. It's joy and responsibility. It's complicated, beautiful, heavy, empowering, all at once. And that's why we're here together. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about me so that you know who is on the mic every week. I was born here, like I mentioned earlier, in the US, but as a kid, I lived in Mexico for a few years, and those years shaped me so much. I feel like living in Mexico gave me my roots. You know, the language, the traditions, the way family and community are everything. And they also gave me that support from my grandparents, whom I, carry with so much love. I lost my grandma 2 years ago, and whenever I think of my roots and my culture, she is someone who always comes up in my mind, and I'm just so thankful for having the opportunity to spend that time and be so connected to my culture. So when I came back to the US, it was like, boom, another world, At home, I was still deeply connected to my culture, but outside, I was trying to adapt. I was translating for my parents. I was trying to figure out the school system, and I was also helping, everyone else with the things that they couldn't do because of the language or access. As a chiquita, I felt that weight of responsibility. I had to succeed, but I also had to be that bridge for my family. And then as I continued to get older and adapt more to this culture and try to, assimilate while also not wanting to assimilate, I started to go to college. And that was a whole nother world. I was a Latina, and being Latina in the US was different at this age. I saw the exclusion and was very well aware of it. I saw the lack of representation in my classrooms. Today, I see the lack of representation in leadership, in the spaces that I was stepping into. And then when there was representation, it didn't look like me. It was often stereotypes that didn't tell our real stories. That's why representation is so important to me. It's honestly not just about chasing my own dreams and goals and wanting to empower myself as a Latina. It's about opening doors, creating pathways, making sure other Latinas feel proud and seen. So when I say this podcast comes from my heart, I mean it. Because I've lived the responsibility, the pride, the culture, and the gaps. And I bring not only my story, but also my training as a therapist to hold this space with you. Because I know the healing power of being seen, heard, validated, and just having a space where there is that connection among other people who navigate the same challenges. So, amiga, what can you expect in this space? We're going to get real about the pressure of being la primera, mental health and breaking stigmas in our communities and families, dinero, and what it's like helping our parents while building or trying to build our own life, dating, boundaries, culture. Yes, we're gonna go there. The times when you go to the Thanksgiving gathering or it's Christmas and the tía comes out and says, ¿Y por qué todavía no te casas? ¿Y por qué no tienes novio? Definitely gonna explore that. The joy of our culture and why joy is a form of resistance. And of course, the political climate and how it directly impacts our families, our communities, and our culture. Some episodes will be just me, cafecito in my hand, chatting with you all. Others, I'll bring in guests, other first-gen daughters, experts, leaders. But at the heart of it, this podcast is about connection, about having conversations we've been needing. I also want to point out that this podcast called first-gen daughters really focuses on the first-gen oldest daughter. And when I use that term, I also want you guys to know that I don't necessarily mean on a chronological age, but rather what are some of the roles that we have played that very much are connected to being the oldest daughter. I know that in different families, in different cultures, the middle daughter has actually taken the role of being the eldest and those responsibilities. So this is not just for the first oldest daughter, but rather just first-gen daughters in general. So, querida first-gen daughter, este espacio is for you, for us, to feel seen, celebrated, and reminded that being the first doesn't mean you have to do it alone. If you liked this episode, hit follow so you don't miss what's next, and do me a favor, share this with another hija primera, tu hermana, tu prima, tu amiga, tu tía, tu vecina, porque when we build comunidad, we build power. Once again, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Dear First Gen Hija. Let's walk this journey together. And more than anything, I hope you continue to listen because this community is just getting started.